Okay, let's get started then. So, hello everyone, and good to have you here. I am Bronwyn Smith-Thomas. I work at Zero Carbon Guildford, which hosts the Sustainable Business Network, and this is a lunch and learn session. It's one of a series that we run, and we're intending to run some more through the year. So really delighted to have Mike here with us to present today. So I'm going to hand over to him in a moment, have good opportunity to hear from him, and then some chance for Q&A towards the end. So I'll just hand over to Mike.
Thank you, Brian. Hello, everyone. So I'll jump in. We don't have a huge amount of time today, so I'll try and be quick because I can sometimes waffle on. So just in, oh, apologies. So in the next sort of 40 minutes or so, what this lunch and learn hopefully aim to do will give you a bit of practical advice about how to balance some sustainable business growth with sustainable actions. So identifying how you can find growth through responsible practices as a business. And that will hopefully transfer or transform sustainable compliance and cost to strategic opportunity. So in this session, we're going to cover a little bit about what I do day to day, what a sustainable business looks like, what sustainable growth actually means, and then jump into some key strategies around balancing your sustainability and your business's growth. And then wrap it up with a couple of clear ways that you can implement that and make some starts or some progress, and then give some time at the end, as Brian said, to answer any of your questions. So a little bit about me. I'm Mike. I work at 5D and I've been here for a couple of years now, and I've got about 7 or 8 years working in different aspects of sustainability, from sustainable livelihoods in international development to behaviour change with communities and sustainable affordable housing in the built environment. So bit of a breadth, and today I work at 5D, managing the team and leading on our impact and partnership side. As you can see on the screen, we 5D Net Zero ourselves. We are a business that helps other organizations understand their environmental impact, develop goals that align with their business, and then develop strategies to get to those goals. We've come about as a sort of response to a lot of jargon throwing and perceived complexity. There you go, lots of jargon already. In the sustainable environment. And so our aim is to simplify that and remind people that it's people who make the changes, help organizations be credible in what they report and how they talk about it, and share the knowledge. A lot of this is not complicated. It's my day to day, so so I'm at the cold face of it. So it makes it really easy for me to share the knowledge that otherwise might feel a bit confusing, and we provide hands-on support. So we're there if you need it. So jumping in first is I just want you to think about just for a couple of seconds what is sustainability and what that means for businesses. If anyone wants to jump out, a lot of people don't like to say anything on these calls, but if you did want to say what you think it means to you, please do, or drop something in the comments. But I'll jump through unless someone wants to. That's okay. So sustainability for business is quite simple. We like to talk about the triple bottom line. So this is about creating value for business and understanding what value businesses create, and also the essentials for businesses to grow in a long-term way. So the triple bottom line, or the 3 Ps, sort of builds on the idea that profit is always the bottom line. There's always the driver for businesses, and understanding that actually, if you focus on people, on social infrastructure, in developing your team and planet, so the environment around us and biodiversity and things like emissions and water management, material management, that actually is not just good for society, which is awesome, we like that, but also really good for business. Because it helps foster long-term growth rather than taking now to forfeit in the future. So going into that a little bit more, this is just as a easy remembrance, it's sustainable business is about being responsible for the impact that you have and being resilient to a changing world. In a more jargony way, it's about ensuring that your strategies balances the economic growth of your business with the environmental and social responsibility. So maximizing value in the long term rather than focusing on short-term gains. This is a bit of a historical shift that's been happening for the last 10 years or so. It used to be a lot of it used to focus on profit versus planet and social, so environmental and social. We would exploit people and exploit nature to maximize growth, often in the short term. And particularly in the last 5 years, but I think it's been growing since sort of maybe the 90s. It's really understood that to gain profit, you need to develop these other sort of capitals, and that often is seen through social areas and being a steward to the environment that we work in. Why does this matter? Why am I talking about this, and why is it becoming such a big thing? Primarily for me, it's because of wanting to sustain an environment that we can, as humans, live in a society today, and addressing those climate pressures that we're seeing, extreme weather, and heat and temperature, and the irregular levels of those, even if they're not extreme. Not being able to forecast patterns of weather does have challenges around logistics, yield of crops, etc., etc. There's also through that, as from sustainable, from climate pressures, but also from political pressures and other things, the economic environment today is more uncertain than it was probably 20 years ago. And so being a sustainable business means that you can start being a bit more resilient to those economic uncertainties because you're developing for the long term and not rushing into things. There's also pressures from customers and clients, and that and regulatory and legislative pressures seem to be the driving force at the moment, which is the fact that either customers want to have more sustainable things and purchase more sustainable things, or clients, other businesses are having to report themselves through legislation or want to do the right thing, inverted commas. And that has resulted in a opportunity for businesses to start investing in their own operations with more than just a focus on profit, which gives them opportunities to grow and be more resilient to those changes that are happening. And those core foundations, as you can see on the screen, is obviously making sure that your business is viable every day to day, but also ensuring that you are going above and beyond to be a steward to environmental practices and for social practices, and making sure that your governance is ethical and transparent. And I'm going to throw a few case studies in as we go. But I really wanted to give a shout out to a local Surrey business who has sort of excelled on this. Plant Passion is based in the Surrey Hills. They are a seasonal, scented and sustainable flower grower. And I had the privilege in the last year to work with them to try and capture all the hard work they've been doing for the last 10, 15 years to minimize waste on their farm, to reduce any dependency on unnecessary energy, and to try and produce the most sustainable flowers that they could. And with that, they have sort of become a sort of a champion in British flower growing, because they are around about 6.4 times less emissions per stem of flower than the sort of flowers you can buy in a supermarket. So rather than being almost 2.88 kilograms of CO2 when you go buy your a single rose from a supermarket, they are actually only under half a kilogram. And it's not just carbon, it's just a really useful tool to compare. They have minimum waste coming from the site, everything's compostable. They're one of the leaders in new methods of farming, so no dig methods, things like that. And that's really brought about a very loyal customer base that will be willing to pay a little bit more for quality flowers that last longer, and have been able to build their business off the back of that. And talking about building the business off the back of something, it's important to talk about sustainable growth in sort of a separate way to a sustainable business. Sustainable growth traditionally is around the maximum growth that a company can have without having external financial support, so loans, etc., etc. Continual external support, I should say. It's about focusing on business expansion through consistent productivity and producing quality goods rather than rushing a process for short-term gains. And you can see that in terms of sustainable business growth as a really growing sector. So internationally, up to about just before COVID, the sustainable business sectors were growing about 5.6 times faster than non-sustainable counterparts. And more recently, in the green industry, specifically in the UK, it's grown 4 times faster. And that's a revenue of 30.8% increase year on year through the reviews that have been done. And that's an ONS review, so the Office of National Statistics in the UK, and that meant around about it was 54.4 billion pounds addition in growth in sustainable sector. So it's a big market. It's even bigger globally. So for international markets, there's 17 billion US dollars available or valued as in the global markets. So sort of just trying to give like an idea of it's even with all the responsibilities, there's a really big market that is growing and continually growing. And there are real benefits to being a sustainable business. So it's not just about doing the right thing. It's also about, I've talked a little bit about uncertainties increasing. There's a big thing about reducing your own risk and external risks. So being more resilient, finding areas to increase margins, so that reduces your costs. And allows you to increase your profits in the short term, but also then if you start having pricing pressures, you have the ability to adapt and grow with those needs. There is legislation coming. If you're working in any EU or actually the US has also still got some requirements around reporting more broadly on your environmental and social as well as your governance. But even if you're going in the UK, the big leading one is the NHS. So they require any supplier coming to becoming a proper supplier to the NHS, they have to show that they are reporting on their emissions at the very least and reducing them, commit to a target to reduce them over time and showing how they're going to do that. They also have to do the same for how companies are developing a framework internally to add social value and communicate that. There's also some soft things around doing this and being a sustainable business. It really helps engage your stakeholders. So there's quite a lot of proof to show that through engaging sustainable business practice, you can improve your brand image, and that helps enhance your community, your clients, your customers to want to buy your product or service. And when there are challenges with increased pricing, etc., through being sustainable business and having ethical practices, you often then have a better relationship already with your clients. There's a two-way conversation, and then that way you can have flexibility in still providing your services or your goods to your client base. It also really helps with just ensuring that internally there's quite a lot of evidence around improving employee retention, so you don't have to keep recruiting for new staff, because you're helping work with your staff to upskill them, develop them, and so they feel like they've got a longer term career with you. And on the flip side, when you are attracting new talent, as it were, new staff, it's a growing demand for people looking for jobs to have some sort of sustainability within, even if it's not in their career title, in the jobs they're working for, or much more purpose-led than maybe they were 5, 10 years ago. So, balancing sustainability and growth. I'll go into a little bit more detail around developing each of these bits, but what we'll cover is around developing sustainable goals, taking a phased approach and not trying to do everything overnight, using data and systems and tech to help advance that, using your customers as the drive always to make sure that you're not only getting distracted by not that you're so that you don't get distracted by trying to just do something that you think is interesting, but rather that you have that conversation with your customers or your clients. So as you become more sustainable, they've got buy-in, and you're also still providing exactly what they need, and then using partnerships to keeping that going. I'll go into that all in detail, but I also just wanted to do just another little, before we go, it's just a top level example of a company that has balanced sustainability and growth. It's actually, again, one of our clients who, unfortunately, I can't give a name, but they are NHS dialysis provider in the UK with over 20 sites, and through understanding their own environmental impact, they identified that they had really high levels of energy use and water use. Water use was sort of expected as a dialysis, but through the next stage of doing a energy audit, within a month or so of doing a few energy audits at sites, they identified over £100,000 a year in savings just through small tweaks and changes in their own operations by using tech to instill systems to manage the heat levels of all the aircon and heating, so that they weren't both on at the same time. And then alongside that, doing some engagement with their own staff to talk about being aware of energy use, etc. So they started rolling that out, and it's a good example of where you can find opportunity as a business while that also being a good environmental thing that you can shout about. So defining your goals. These are the sort of clear 4 steps. So it's to come or align your sustainability goals with your business aims. It's really important to start at where you are at. So most of the time today, that's talking about carbon, is the understanding your carbon footprint. And that's basically because it's a sort of universal tool at the moment, and while it is very focused, it gives usable measurement that you can report on, and it helps you develop sort of smart goals. So specific, measurable, achievable, and relevant and timely. So it has a time limit. And that doesn't have to be, if you don't go into a full carbon footprint, you can look at water management, you can look at waste management, you can look at something more broad, like an environmental management plan, and it's working out exactly what's right for you. We find, particularly for SMEs, it's it's really useful to start with carbon because it's, like I've said, it gives that sort of clear, measurable, and actionable insights into what your business operations are doing, and what that means environmentally, and how to communicate that really well with external parties and internal parties. So once you've got oh, sorry, trying to scroll up my notes. Once you've got your footprint and you understand your baseline of where you are today, and you start developing some clear targets, or if you are going to go down the carbon route, there's some really helpful guidance on an SME climate hub. But there are different ways of reporting, but there's some really clear guidance. So normally, if you're trying to get to net zero, the latest you should be aiming for is 2050. If you're an NHS supplier, that's actually a little bit earlier. They're looking ideally for 2040, but if not 2040, 2045 as sort of where you're going to get to net zero. What net zero means is that you've identified areas of emissions within your operations, and whether that is the electricity you're using at your office or at your factory, the vehicles you use to deliver any products or any business travel that occurs, etc., like that. And you can identify where they are, those sort of hotspots where you're both mainly emitting, and then reduce those over time. And then net zero is when you've reduced all of those down to at least 90% if you're aligning with SBTI, and that might change a little bit depending industry on industry. They've got industry specific guide on the SBTI website. But yeah, once you develop those and identified what goals are right for you to keep within the guidelines of reducing your impact, then it's start breaking up that over time and giving yourself some smart framework. Like I said, that's specific. What are you going to do? Measurable. How are you going to see if what you're going to do was achievable? So being realistic about it, relevant. So it's actually going to reduce those environmental footprints, and then timely. So giving a time frame for you to actually reduce that impact. And then once you've done that, then it's about phase approach. So one of the biggest things I think I've seen businesses be struggling with in recent years is that there's an excitement and an ambition to be the leader in sustainability, and so often put in quite ambitious targets. So you often see people maybe around COVID giving targets to being net zero by 2030 or even net zero by 2025 for businesses that would not be able to achieve that, and then have stress internally and then embarrassment externally having to change targets once they've realized it's not possible. And rather than having all those stresses, it's much better to then actually break down where, like I've said, those hotspots, where can you make the biggest changes, and then doing those first, year by year by year. You don't need to do it overnight. If you can, that's amazing. But normally it's actually about giving yourself time. In the first few years, if you haven't decreased as much as you'd like, as long as you are identifying those areas and finding solutions so that you are able to. If you've got a lot of Arctic lorries, you're not going to be able to change that today. If you still want to deliver the same volumes, there aren't infrastructure, etc. But you might be able to do some simpler things. Maybe you're working with your producers to identify areas that they can reduce emissions or reduce waste, and that could hopefully find savings in there too. Cool. And a big thing with all of this is using data and tech to help you, but not expecting tech will be the silver bullet. I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole of AI today, but there are some really good case studies for that. I found out why I can't get my mouse. For using AI. But instead of focusing on AI, I'm going to talk a little bit about data use and systematic improving systems, and then tech in general. So using data. Using data can be done in various ways, but a good way of doing it is trying to get the best data that you can for your operations to then make the data-driven decisions. A lot of people, particularly with carbon footprinting, once they start looking at things in their supply chain, they have a tendency to do the quickest and easiest thing to report on by using the amount they spend on their supply chain to get those services or get that support from the supply chain. If you do that, then you're using a very top level proxy data, which won't give you some key insights into how to improve. So while it makes it easy to report, it doesn't give you any real clear insight to make data-driven decisions. So tracking key metrics in your greenhouse gas or your waste greenhouse gas emissions, or if it's in waste generation and management or water, or just general sustainable sourcing practices, using data to track that is really, really helpful. And it can also help you optimize. So if you use systems to track and improve those environmental performances, a really good example of this, just to give it a bit more tangible meaning, is looking at logistics. So if you work in logistics and using systems to track your company vehicles, and to look at routes that they're doing to deliver whatever goods are being delivered, you can then start looking at ways of optimizing those journeys, which reduces the emissions. That's great. Reduces wear in the vehicles. That's great. But also saves you money in the long run because you're not having to repair the vehicles as much and you're not using as much energy to get the vehicles to from A to B. Another way of using data and systems is around circular economy. So a good example is in Europe, they have a return deposit scheme for bottles, and you can use tracking numbers to then keep a tab of certain areas that are doing it well and certain areas that aren't. And the reason why that is good for the environment is that you can then start making decisions on engaging the local area and the local population to use your deposit scheme, return deposit scheme, to bring back the bottles, which then hopefully improves the amount of people doing it, but also reduces the amount of new bottles you need to produce and wastage, breakage, things going to landfill, which has more of an environmental impact. And in terms of tech, a lot of people are very excited constantly about tech solutions. And tech brands and tech businesses being the solution for a lot of things. And I tend to be a little bit skeptic around that because a lot of easy wins for most businesses to be more sustainable and continue focusing on what makes their business great is actually people, not tech. That being said, if you are looking at this sort of thing, then it's making sure that the tech is right for you. So if you're looking at improving reporting using tech to understand a clearer basis of how much electricity you're using, or improving your agriculture by using drones and sensors to understand where's best to plant. So it can be as big as that, or it can be as simple. And an example I wanted to use was around the cloud. So the adoption to using cloud software for small to medium businesses, particularly, has been growing. I think companies like Google have done a good job at packaging that as a really exciting thing, but we're still seeing quite a lot of people having office-based like data centers, so having a server in your cupboard, etc. But if so for an SME, so for people who are up to about 250 staff, if they shift a server board, so in their office, to an online server, that can actually reduce energy consumption up to 87%. So not only is it cheaper for you to run, and your internal bills are cheaper, it also, because of economies of scales, allows these big organizations to cool and run these servers at a much more efficient way, reducing the environmental requirements. As I mentioned before, while you're looking to combine sustainability with business growth, it's really important to keep your customers in mind. There will be different changes in operational practice as you go through, but actually that's just opportunity for you to improve what you're already providing while you develop it. So it's making sure that you engage your customers and are transparent about your process. So as much as you might want to shout out about how sustainable you are today and how great you are, and maybe forget about the areas you need to improve, long term, it's much more powerful to engage your customers, to understand the journey that you're going along, find ways of talking to them about their needs and wants in terms of what you provide, and making sure that you go that way as well. And a big value of this is that creates a memorable customer experience as you're engaging them and developing, because they will feel like they've got buy-in to your brand and what you're trying to do, that gives a longer term relationship. And a big part of that is actually engaging your own staff. So I think one of the things that I've seen that businesses are struggling with is that they create a lovely sustainability plan, and then they sort of do one announcement, and then they haven't talked to any of their customers beforehand. So it's not actually exactly providing the same services, etc., or good. It feels changed or more expensive. So the customers are then not bought in, but then also the staff don't feel like they're part of that strategy. So they don't feel like they understand. They might not agree. They don't know if they're just sort of there to turn up at their job. And then when they talk to customers or clients, they don't have the buy-in. The staff don't have the buy-in themselves to actually talk to those customers. If you flip that on its head and you engage your customers through it at pinpoints, at key areas, talk about the experiences that you're going through, the challenges you might have, and how you've solved them, that then is a really lovely narrative that you can talk to them about, and hopefully bring new, exciting, new clients along the journey. But then also having your staff be part of that journey, that can show a real you can get loyalty internally and improve the consistencies of comms and communications going out. And a lovely example of how of a company that has done this quite well is Pella. So Pella case are a compostable phone case, and while they were looking at a sort of a customer problem, which is lots of people want cases to look after their phones, but a lot of these cases then just sit in people's drawers and take up quite a lot of space once they're not used before going to landfill. And as part of that, there was a growing demand for eco-friendly alternatives to the conventional plastic products that you were seeing. And so Telia started developing these compostable phone cases, and they are plant-based, and that resulting in 30% less carbon emissions than traditional phone cases and 34% less water used to manufacture each case. And that story that they were developing while they're developing the product and engaging their the customers that were interested, that story started showing their development and their progress. And then once they got something that customers really loved, those customers have had buy-ins that kept coming back. And that's allowed quite a lot of loyalty, but also accessed a market where from customer surveys, they're saying about 64% of customers rank sustainability as a key driver when making sort of longer term decisions. So for products such as accessories for phones, and so they started to access a market that probably wasn't there before. And that's because they had customers at the center of their growth model. So the final one is one that a lot of people talk about, around having just strong strategic partnerships. And this is really down to the fact that no business is an island, and teams can't do it all on their own. A lot of time, some of the sort of in-depth knowledge it needs to be external, or it's just like as part of your supply chain, you need to work with your supply chain to improve and find opportunities to grow. And so it's about focusing on what you excel at as a team, and then working with others to fill the gaps where maybe you need additional support. When you're doing this, it's really important to define a clear value proposition. So what are you giving to the relationship, and what are they giving to relationship? And making sure that your goals are aligned. Some people will say yes to anything when you say that you want to work on something sustainable, whether that's improving your water or developing a product, etc. People, particularly in this environmental climate, will be just eager to work with you. But if their goals aren't aligned, you might quickly find that they drag their feet on certain things and actually slow down your transitions or make things more costly. It's really important not just to work with people that you like, but people who have the capabilities internally to fill the gaps in your business model. If it is around sustainable support, it's identifying that it's the right one for you and not just the biggest name or someone who says that they'll give you a quick win, because often with those quick wins, it's actually not a win at all. With particularly for the partnerships around where it's around developing products or services or transitioning, you're like having change happen in your business, it's really important to make sure that your communication is good. You have regular check-ins, feedback. You both have opportunities to discuss issues in a sort of managed environment. And off the back of that, having relationships that are adaptive and they can evolve as you change, and making sure that your partnership is ready for the market. And the example I wanted to give for that was actually another Surrey-based organization called Chimney Fire Coffee. They're a lovely B Corp based in the Surrey Hills again, and they have really good partnerships actually with their supply chain. So they produce coffee that has 100% compostable and recyclable packaging, and they work directly with coffee growers to produce really high quality coffee that is at the very minimum fair trade prices, but most of them are above and beyond, so that the farmers have ownership of their own supply chain. There's no middle person getting a cut or no real value, and that means that the customers at the end can get a really great affordable coffee that is also just really sustainable, and the farmers have good wages, which allows them to have more time to look at other sustainable things within their own operations. And with that, Chimney Fire actually work with their farmers to identify those areas that they can improve. And in terms on the flip side, because of the way that the Chimney Fire Coffee works with the partners in the local area, particularly they now have a located Vineyard in Surrey. So they've been able to develop these customer experiences, which is like built on the relationship they already have with the customer. So they offer a whole range of different things, from coffee tasting, so bringing the customers in to actually see how amazing the product is, to community events, showing people how the roasteries works, and engaging people on B Corp and talking about businesses with purpose. And this works. So in less than, I think it's about 5 years, they've gone from a back garden cabin to a 4,000 square foot facility at Denby's, the vineyard I was talking about. It now has partnerships with over 150 different independent cafes, offices, hotels, all sorts, retailers across the UK, and it allowed them to adapt to those and changing environments. So during the COVID pandemic, they swapped from trying to get it into shops to going into subscription platform, and they were able to do that because of the partnerships they had. And that's again just sort of highlights where sustainability is not just environment, because as part of all of this, their social drive has made them more resilient and allowed them to start donating 10% of their net profits through a community impact fund, which is really cool, and supporting a charity that is called Recycle. It fixes up bikes to give access for rural African communities so that they can travel and do their jobs, etc. So yeah. So all of this sounds really nice. A lot of theory, a lot of me talking. That's come to an end. But just as a sort of wraparound and a reminder of the practical things that you can actually do. So focusing on this is all very nice, and I sometimes get it when I talk to people about sustainability. They go like, "That's great. I'm having to worry about increasing costs and focusing on stable revenue, right? Good income and just covering ends meet." But with those threats, with unstable economy and environmental challenges, actually talking about what I've just gone through is key. So understanding where you are today, we do a lot of carbon footprinting work, and we think that's a really good start. Is just understanding your baseline, where are you at now, and then developing actually strong, good goals to where to get to, and how they align to your actual business growth goals, is a really valuable and step-by-step way of getting there. It gives you identifies where you've got opportunities and where you've got threats to your business model. So I really recommend putting that in practice and then committing to the phased approach. You don't have to do this overnight, and actually make much bigger progress long term if you do take it step by step. Making sure that you actually allocate resources internally. One of the things I see a lot when people are having challenges with aligning their business growth with sustainability is that they haven't given time to the sustainable change. It's been a bit of a tick box. Got my lovely plan that's very visual and very beautiful, or even just a carbon reduction plan. Cool, that's that done. I'll forget about it. And then haven't put in the time and money to do those initiatives to make those changes. And without making those changes, you won't see the benefits. And just as a final reminder, like partnering with others will help you because it lightens the load, but also it gives you opens up opportunities for new markets and new ways of doing things. Cool. So just as a bit of a next step, so Surrey Greener Futures, a part of the Surrey County Council, are doing a Surrey Decarbonise course, and there's only 3 dates left. I think you can still sign up to them. So if you go and look up Surrey Greener Futures, or just decarbonise course, you'll be able to find the link. And there's next week and following couple of weeks, or following week, and then one in March, there will be a course that runs through a bit of business context around climate change, and helps you understand where your business is, where you start, and gives you some sort of intros into calculating your own footprint, so your own business footprint, and how to be more sustainable, identifying around energy costs, etc. It's really good. It's run in part with SBN, so I really recommend you go and have a little look at that. And if you can't make those dates, but you still want some information, I really recommend the SME Climate Hub. They've got loads of information on there, and I think they still have a free calculator to get you started. Or obviously, if you want something a bit more technical, hands-on, in terms of understanding where you're at and where you want to go and how to get there, you're always more than welcome to get in touch, and I can see if I can help. So I think this is the end of the talk. What I'm going to do is stop sharing my screen. I think we're going to have a bit of time for some conversations.